Today I'm going to be talking to you house hackers. Now, house hacking is becoming a very unique form of investing. A lot of millennials are getting into the house hacking craze. I think it's a really awesome method for individuals with low capital to become a successful investor. Obviously, we know that I feel like investing in real estate is the most viable option for a person with minimal knowledge and limited income or limited funds or capital to become successful and to be able to acquire real estate as an asset. So let's talk about some of the threats to house hacking, whether it's from Airbnb or someone owning a house and renting out rooms, or a person becoming a renter. For one of the first major threats is HOAs, right? A lot of people fear the HOAs. Now, HOAs are definitely something that can come between you and making an income as a house hacker. Why, right? So HOAs set specific limitations within a community. HOAs have votes, they have boards. All these people have contribution to deciding about what you can do with a specific property. One of the most common types of HOAs are within condominiums or townhomes. Condos are definitely heavy with HOAs. It's going to be rare that you find a condo that does not have an HOA. So what does that look like? Well, with a condo, the HOA are going to have specific requirements and restrictions associated with what you can do with that property. Because in a condo, you don't technically own the common grounds. You own the common grounds jointly. Now, with a townhome, you actually own your property, the actual structure that you live in from the walls in, and then you most of the time own the property that's in front and in back, meaning your yard, right? But in condominiums, the yard is commonly owned. Even if you have a yard in your front, if you're technically living in what's designated as a condominium, you may have restrictions and you may not actually own the yard that your house is built on. So with a condo, there's these HOAs. And they have these meetings and they make these decisions. And the commonality with HOAs is they frown upon short-term rentals. Now, it's going to be very important that you identify what short-term rentals look like. Now, I had a client in the past where he was gung-ho about buying into a condominium. I was cool with it. I was representing him. He was a buy and hold investor. He wasn't even a house hacker. He told me specifically that he wanted to buy this house as a rental. So that's what we did. We started working towards buying the house. We got the house under contract. Lo and behold, 2 months prior, the HOA had decided to put a cap on the amount of rentals in the neighborhood, meaning he had to own the house for 2 years. Yes, 2 years. And there was a 20% rental cap, and there was already a waiting list, meaning some people were grandfathered in, but he would not be, meaning he would have to own that property for 2 years. Now, if he didn't have a knowledgeable agent, and we always talk about due diligence, if you want to look back at one of my other due diligence videos, during that due diligence process, we were able to get that information. So HOAs can really throw a monkey wrench in what you're trying to do. So what does that look like for house hackers? Well, let's say you're buying a property with the intent on renting it out or utilizing it as an Airbnb. If you look at your HOAs and look at the covenants and restrictions, it's probably going to say no short-term rentals. And they may even specifically say no Airbnb. The key is to look out for the amendments, right? That's what my client almost missed. The amendment was 2 months old. So a lot of people, a lot of condos are putting these new amendments that say specifically they use the words no Airbnb style rentals, or they may say no hotel style rentals. Back in the day, they used to say short-term rentals, meaning you have to rent your property out for at least 30 days. You have to have a lease and you have to turn the lease in, and it must meet the approval of the HOA. So understanding that HOA is one of the most common threats to house hackers, especially for house hackers that want to rent out rooms or possibly rent out the entire condo or the entire property. Now, the next threat to a house hacker or to a person that's looking to Airbnb or rent out rooms is covenants and restrictions. Now, covenants and restrictions differ a little bit from HOAs. Covenants and restrictions are restrictions that may be levied by HOA, but it also can be levied by another municipality, like by the county or by the city or by local government, right? These restrictions may prevent a person from building a certain type of structure, utilization for a specific use purpose. There's even been covenants and restrictions that require a person to sell a property to an owner occupant. I ran into that recently with a person that wanted to buy a property in an up and coming district. A super hot district, right? A district where there's going to be a ton of house hacking opportunities. You're probably going to be able to rent out each rooms. We had the property under contract for a great rate. He was going to kill the 1% equation. He was going to have a great gross rent multiplier. However, there was a hidden restriction that prevented the house from being sold to a potential investor. A person that had any intent of renting that property out could not buy that property. And guess what? That restriction was in place in perpetuity. That means forever. So again, that was something that completely took that deal off the table. So look for covenants and restrictions. There are also covenants and restrictions that are levied by municipalities. I live in a lake community. Now, when Airbnb became a hot craze, everybody was renting these huge lake houses out, and individuals were making $2,000 a week during peak seasons, right? However, when people start realizing they panties got in a little bunch, they got very upset. And then the local municipality stepped in and started levying restrictions and preventing people for Airbnb, meaning that there were specific things that a rental had to adhere to, meaning they wanted a lease and they wanted the renters to rent for a specific period of time. So we talked about HOAs and we talked about restrictions. Now, the third thing to think about when we're talking about a threat to house hackers, people that are looking at Airbnb and people that are looking to rent out a property is restrictions. These are what we call deed restrictions or deed riders. Now, these are things that may be put in place by a municipality, or it could have been put in place because the place is in a historic district. Again, I've ran into that as well. A booming district that was up and coming. We knew about the exterior covenants and restrictions that prevented individual for changing the exterior of a property. However, they had a deed rider that said that this property could not be rented out. Again, who would have known if you didn't do due diligence? So it's important with deed riders, if you're looking at a property to purchase for house hacking purposes, look up the deed on the register of deeds. And with deed riders, they're typically written in as a description or as an exhibit A, exhibit B, or C at the bottom of a deed. So we talked about three major threats to house hackers. Number one, HOAs, the dreaded HOA. Beware of the HOA. And if they have a HOA, make sure you get those meeting minutes, the HOA meeting minutes, and you understand the health of the HOA. And you want to know if there are any proposed changes to any of the restrictions in the community. The second thing we talked about was covenants and restrictions that can be levied by municipalities or by HOAs. We want to dive into those covenants and restrictions. And if you're working with a real estate agent, it's easy for them to pull them for you. Or you can ask your title company or your attorney to pull those things for you. And the third threat to house hackers is your deed restrictions or your riders to deeds. Again, you want to talk to your title company and you want to talk to your attorney to make sure you understand everything that's going on with that deed. If you have any hopes or house hacking, renting it out, or Airbnb. I hope this information was useful. If you want some additional useful content for us, please subscribe to the Real Newbies channel. Also, click the bell to get alerts and always be updated on what we have coming next.